Good morning. Thank you all for being here. It is clearly a moment of change here in the Heartland, whether we're talking about demographics and identity or politics and race relations. And as we all know, change can be fresh and exciting, or it can be heartbreaking and hard. So we're going to start by talking about all these things through the prism of the media. And we're fortunate to have experts with us here today who are living this change right now. So Todd, I'd like to start with you because it was just 2 weeks ago that the Youngstown Vindicator published its last issue after 150 years. I want to ask, what has the impact of that been on your community, your staff, yourself?
It was a pretty hard day, pretty hard 2 months. We had gone into it knowing some cuts were coming, and we thought it was going to be a funeral for about 20 to 30 of us, managers especially, and what it became was a funeral for about 250,000 people, because the impact of losing a 150-year legacy in your town. It was pretty special, too, to sense. Sometimes you think people are just there for the football scores, for the food events, but some of the engaged citizens seized right away that who's going to do the watchdog work. So that's kind of what it was, and the final day was pretty tough.
Oh. And Rebecca, the Warroad Pioneer, a weekly you published in the northern part of Minnesota, closed in May. And when I read about this, I read that you were, quote, broken by the decision. Can you tell us what led to that decision and what the immediate aftermath has been?
Warroad is a community like many going through transition right now. And we saw a real loss of small business. It's coming back, it's building again, but just couldn't maintain it. And with that, the subscriber base was great. Our following was great. We enjoyed that. But dollars and cents just weren't there. And I talked to people about the fact that an independent weekly is just a small business, and we have to make hard choices the same as anyone else. And so when the dollars and cents aren't there, you have to make those cuts. And at some point, we were a staff of reduced, but a staff that had been together a long time, and the staff finally said, you know what, don't hang yourself out anymore on the debt of keeping paper going. And so we made the choice to close.
Now, when I read stories about the closings, what I was struck by was reader comments, readers who said, oh, we had no idea there was a problem. How is that possible in our environment, and how much it is in the media, how the industry is struggling?
Oh, no, I think we were clear on it. I think we raised our rates, we shrunk our paper, and I think the odd thing when our news came out at the end of June is when we announced, people said, why didn't you just tell us? We would have paid more. And I kind of teased some folks that every price increase we had, you yelled at us. Every time we shrunk a section out of the paper, you yelled at us. So the signs had been there. And I think folks, sometimes we just don't know until it's there. And we have to face that day. So we had to face that day in Youngstown, Ohio.
And did you find that in Warroad as well?
Absolutely. You know, when you're dealing with a paper that's been around that long, people just feel like it's just part of the community. It's no different than a building in town or anything else. And when we got ready to close, it was very mixed emotions all the way around. But I don't think anyone was happy to see that piece of history go, and something that maintains history and keeps pulling. In those smaller weekly papers, we pull a lot back from the archives and do things like that. And in an effort to unite the community, we have new people coming in, and they have to know our DNA. They have to know who we are.
Right. Well, now to talk about something new, Louise, ProPublica, the 10-year-old independent and nonprofit journalism group, has opened its first regional office in Illinois. So I'd like to ask, why the Heartland, and what are the stories you are most excited about telling?
All right. So, as Susan said, we're the first regional operation for ProPublica and the pilot project for what we hope will be a series of operations just like ours. We're going to mark our 2-year anniversary next month. The reason we chose to open our first operation in Chicago, in Illinois, is blindingly obvious to anyone who lives in our state. There is a huge amount of investigative reporting to be done there. You may remember we've had a number of governors go to prison. There are more aldermen in Chicago under indictment than I can count at the current moment. So we thought it was a great environment for us to do the kind of work that we're known for doing. And the other reasons we located there are, second, our model is about collaboration. We do most of our work in partnership with other media organizations, and we wanted to set up shop somewhere where there was still enough of a media ecosystem that we could do that. And Chicago, fortunately, while our media in Chicago and to a greater extent downstate have suffered, there is still life there. And third, we're a nonprofit. We pay for our work through donations, and Chicago and Illinois is a place where there is a strong philanthropic legacy.
Do you think when local papers close, that opens up a bigger role for you to play, or does it make your job harder because of the collaborations you like to have with local papers?
I think it's a little bit of both, actually, because we do like to get our work out to as broad of an audience as we can, and particularly to an audience that is impacted by the issues that we're writing about, and to be able to do that through other media organizations is helpful for us. But at the same time, we've had the opportunity to tell stories that I think would not have been told if we hadn't been there to do them.
Todd, Google News has announced a pilot digital-only project in Youngstown, and the Vindicator's masthead and URL have been purchased by another website. Are you hopeful that either of these websites will serve the purpose that your paper did?
I'm thrilled that the lights will stay on to a degree, but I think any media that's tied to an advertising-based funding system is going to struggle. So I think the McClatchy Google project is tied to local advertising and fundraising, and sponsorships. Our friends to the north, about 20 miles, who bought our title, their model is still tied to advertising. And I think, looking at what ProPublica is doing, any hometown local media program that's fueled by advertising is destined to struggle. And I think the nonprofit future is where we're headed.
Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, national reporters based in New York or LA or DC may try to provide more coverage in the Midwest as local news collapses. In fact, I first read about the Warroad Pioneer in the New York Times. And full disclosure, I was a Midwestern correspondent there for many years. But be harsh in this answer. What do national reporters miss when they come in from the coast to cover your areas? And what do you fear most is lost under that scenario?
So we have a running joke in our former Youngstown newsroom that there's this rusted out steel mill that New York Times and Washington Post would always find whenever they came to town. We can't find it. We have no idea where the hell it's at. But if you go back to April, New York Times came twice. Why they came twice in 4 weeks, I have no idea. But two different writers came watch, and there's this same rusted steel mill. So we got a call from CNN a couple years ago, and they wanted our help to tell the local story, which actually was a tip of the hat to them to actually want to get the local newspapers' help. And we teased them. We said, look, if you want to go to the same rusted steel mill, the same old rusty tracks with weeds coming through, go find them, call the Washington Post. They know where it's at. But if you want to tell the Youngstown story, come and talk to us, and we'll tell you. Because there's a lot of great things going on in Youngstown that the national media misses. They need the story to fit their agenda. And that's what we've seen a lot, at least with the Youngstown story, is they need the closed auto plant, they need the closed steel mill, and that's, I think, what national media misses a ton.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. We're unique where we're located, and we embrace that uniqueness. If you're not in tune with it, you may find it odd. And it's really not, but we like what we do, we like the area that we live, and we really want people to embrace the trials that we went through to get there.
What's the biggest story of the region that you think is not getting enough press, not enough attention, not enough coverage?
I think for the region right now, the biggest thing that's really struggling is a kind of a small business exodus, and how that's being, we're located on Lake of the Woods, and so we are a community that relies on tourism. But I really believe that we have to analyze what it is that we're going to make our small towns look like to serve the people who live there year-round. And maybe those main streets are no longer going to be retail. Maybe they're going to be service-based. And so I think we have to really look at that, and I think we have to ask some hard questions about some of the regional development things that are going on that hopefully are great and are going to drive traffic. But how do we supply the needs of the people who live there year-round?
Any thoughts on the biggest?
I just think that our small towns are rich ecosystems for the coasts to discover. And we had, when Amazon wanted to build their 2 campuses, everyone went crazy in the big cities, in DC and New York, get the choice. And one of our groups in Youngstown that everyone's forgotten about and flew over, they actually took a shot at it. And some folks poked their fingers at, they've already said what they want this, this, and this, and one of our groups said, screw it, we're a great place to live, we might as well speak up. They're going to blow us off anyway, but at least let's get our name out there. So I think the cool things that go on in some of our cities here in the Heartland gets overlooked too easily.
Mm-hmm. We do have a photo of the last issue of the Youngstown Vindicator. If we could show that.
There it is.
There it is.
If you take a look, I'm holding a golf club. I'm on the far left of the photo under 107, and if you look closely to the red-shirted fellow, there's a golf club in his hands.
Why is that?
What's that?
Why the golf club?
Why the golf club? Why not?
Why not?
It's been a relic in my offices dating back to my days in Nebraska. And it just comes with me everywhere. So I felt if this is the last photo of me as a daily newspaper editor, it should be in my photo. So,
how's the former staff? What are they doing these days?
I'd say 50% employed, 50% still looking for work, still working hard. And I think more so, I think the staff is okay. It's the community that's still grappling with it. So, but media folks are scrappy. We'll figure it out, and especially in Youngstown, you're pretty scrappy as well. So I think it's part of our DNA.
Of the people who are employed, what kind of work did they go into?
Actually, on the newsroom side, a lot of our reporters found content work. Our copy desk staff is still looking for work. I think they'll get into content. Our sales folks are trying to find sales jobs. So I think everyone's staying in their niche. Just definitely not going back to newspapers for a while. But I'd say 8 of our reporters found jobs in other local media groups.
Okay. So. Just a reminder to get your questions into Slido. Type them in and we'll be turning to you in just a few minutes. We also have a photo of the last issue of the Warroad Pioneer. If you could show that. Rebecca, you can tell us.
This wasn't actually the last issue. This was one we did about a year and a half ago. And that was kind of our first rally cry of, things are not looking good. And so that was on the flip side of that front cover. We had testimonials and content talking about the value of a paper to a community. And then we also put in a little bit of financial information and really felt like that would maybe send out a message.
Right.
And it did for a little while, but it didn't fix anything.
I mean, that's a pretty bold cover. That's
so
white space with a few words saying, without you, there is no newspaper. And yet people were still surprised when you closed.
They were. I'm always amazed how people don't understand how media is funded. And I think that in small communities, they honestly believe that there is some end of subsidy that funds us to be able to share information. And they don't understand that it is all ad-driven and that without small business without Business in General and an ad platform, we can't maintain it.
It'd be sure if the crowd knows here that 80% of your newspaper, your journal, is funded by advertising. The 75 cents, the $1.50 you pay for a paper, added up, it's only 20% of our life. 80% comes from the Targets and the other stores. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, Louise, you were a Chicago Tribune reporter for many years, and you won a Pulitzer Prize there. How is what you're doing now different or the same from your previous job?
People ask me that a lot. It's the same in that it's about journalism and it's about telling important stories that need to be told. It's different in that it's highly focused work that we do. We only do one kind of journalism, investigative journalism, and I think when people turn to us, and sometimes people will ask me, are you the solution? And I'll say, well, I would hope to think that we're part of the solution, but we don't do what these publications did and serve communities in the same way. We serve communities, but we're not going to the school board meetings. We're not writing about the local factories in the same way. And so I think that when we look toward the future and what makes us different versus what makes us the same, I think we're a really important part of what things should look like going forward, but we're not the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any questions from Slido? Are you all typing them in? We're going to turn to the audience in just a few moments. Here's another question. Looking back at your work at the Pioneer, what story would you say you were most proud of over those years?
Proud of and passionate about are probably two different ones.
You can tell us both.
The proud of, I would say we did some work with the school board. There was some funding issues and some building renovation issues, and we kind of felt like all the information wasn't being put out there and that it wasn't being well thought out. And we followed on that, found some issues with open meeting issues and things. And so I think that was probably one of our pieces that made the biggest impact on stopping.
So it sounds like some real investigative work.
Out of control, absolutely.
Yeah. And a staff of how many?
Well, a full-time staff of 3, and then freelance writers and things like that. So about 5 of those.
It's amazing what you can accomplish with just 3 reporters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I say on the human interest in, people look at small papers and a lot of it they think, oh, this is folksy, this is hometown news, this is all of that. And I remember one time a reader had asked me to do an ag story on a retired farmer. And so I had kind of put it off because I wasn't really maybe as motivated as I should have been, and I thought, okay, it's another ag story. And I wound up coming into fall, and I called the gentleman, and I went out to do the story, and when I walked in, I instantly knew that this wasn't an ag story. It was a story about a love story. And in the story, and I kind of link it back a little bit to what's going on with newspaper right now, the gentleman sat at the table, his wife made pie, and we sat there, and I looked out, and there was a flax field. And for those of you that don't know, a flax field is a very bright blue field, and it's gorgeous. And I said, wow, how nice is it that this beautiful view from your window? And his wife said, he planted it just for me. I always wanted a flax field there. The story grew to talk about that she had had a heart attack and that he had almost lost her. And he told me, he said, my wife always asks me, do you cherish me? Do you cherish me? And he says, I never understood what cherishing meant to her. And he said, when I almost lost her, I knew what cherishing meant. And I believe that as communities lose their paper, they'll cherish it more. And so in Warroad, we have another paper that has started up, The Advocate, and I hope, people ask me, what should we do with this new paper? How should we feel about the new paper? And I said, if you want a paper in town, then support it. Get behind it and support it. But if you get behind it and support it, don't support it just for a 13-week trial. Be in it for the long run. Be in it financially. Be in it with content and ownership of that paper. And cherish it.
Yeah, I just think the newspaper, and maybe even backing up, the journalism in each of our communities is that light and that oxygen. And you want the journalism for the watchdog stuff, and you also want it for the Oprah Winfrey stuffs. You know, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, celebrating high school graduations, whatever, and it's going to go away. And it probably still will, but I think if you invest, get the subscriptions. A week before we closed, I was at a golf event, and a doctor asked me what I could have done. And I broke it down to 80-20, and he said, so with this newspaper, I should be buying some advertising. And I said, exactly. Fund the newspaper subscription, fund it with advertising. When you're slicing off a little bit to the hotshot 30-year-old digital guy, slice a little bit off for your print product. It's expensive, but not having your journalism in town, and especially through your print product, is even more expensive. And I think each of us, we have Flint, Michigan, not too far away. We have a fracking story I could tell you afterward that, you know, Flint only happened in one city. No, it happened in us. There's examples in all of our cities where not having that public light and that oxygen that is journalism has been detrimental. So,
now, Louise, you all have hit the road running. I believe we have a slide from ProPublica. We can throw that up now. Can you tell us about what the beginning has been like?
I can.
there's a question.
And I think I'm looking for the slide to remind me of the stories. But so as I said, we're going to hit our 2-year anniversary next month. We have 5 project reporters on our staff. And if you look at the array of stories that we've been able to tell just in that period of time, we reported for more than a year on the unfair ticketing practices of the city of Chicago, which has unfairly targeted minority poor drivers. As a result of that, the city council has adopted a whole slew of reforms, and the mayor has also followed up with reforms. We were the first news organization to publish and report on errors and misinformation in the city police department's gang database. That has been changed as a result of our reporting. Most recently, we did a story that broke nationally about parents who were transferring guardianship of their teenage children in order to qualify them for college financial aid they wouldn't have otherwise received. The Federal Department of Education and state lawmakers are working to close that legal loophole, and I could go on and list probably half a dozen other investigations that we've been able to do just in the last 23 months that I think reflect, again, the stories that aren't going to be told unless we all as citizens make an effort to support journalism.
Right. Great. We're going to turn to one question through Slido. How would desire or need of retention of private donors influence news coverage? Thoughts on that?
I think we've been battling that challenge for, I don't think it's much different with donors as it is with Hy-Vee or Target or the Howard Hanna Realtor. So the influence and the pressure for what to cover, what not to cover has existed for years. It's now just going to shift from the advertiser getting upset at you, and now it's the donor, but to us it's the same decision. Hopefully your business model is diversified enough where you can just tell Mr. Hy-Vee that, sorry, this is the story that we're going with, and if you choose to walk away, that's fine. But the pressure is not new to us. It's just shifting from advertising to donor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would agree. If you have a line between editorial and business, you have a line. And if you maintain that line, then it's not a concern.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and especially in a small town, you look at they're your neighbors, they're your friends, they're the businesses that drive the economy. You have to set some standards and you have to set some lines. And if you do that, I think people appreciate it. I think there are those at times you might take a little heat that didn't appreciate it, but for the most part, I think it sets your integrity.
You have a story of that in the
little.
yeah.
It was any of us care if our family is in the paper, whether it's something good or something negative. And over the years, we are a small community. We still do the court report. We've had people over the years challenge why we do it. That was a decision on my end for a couple reasons, but the biggest one for me is I feel like we live in a time with very little accountability. And if some sense that is makes you a little accountable, then it's probably good. And this last week I got stopped for speeding, so I will be in the court report this coming issue probably. And so was I more concerned about the speeding or more concerned about, oh, great. There was a little bit of that. So on my trip here, I did set my cruise. But, I think that making people understand when you live in a community that can be so divided that the paper values everyone the same. And that's a hard thing to do.
And treats everyone.
And treats everyone the same. And so to do that, you may cost you money.
Correct, absolutely.
Along the way. So,
right. Well, I think we leave it right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.